On here with, first of all, news today is of yesterday's Supreme Court loss. What does that mean?
Well, it's not really a loss so much as they just didn't grant the petition, which means that we can always go back at that during the recount, during the contest phase of the recount. And I suspect what the court is going to say is that they don't want to get involved in this until after the hand recount is done to see if indeed that is necessary. And if we're behind and we feel that the reconciliation will close the gap, we'll make that part of our election contest. So, we felt like it was important for the people of Minnesota to do it early, to try and resolve this before late December. But if the court would prefer that we do this in December, we'll do it in December.
Yeah. What's going on there? Why do you think the court ruled the way they did?
Well, I think that they ruled that way because I think that they felt it was an issue that should be dealt with during a contest phase. And that's when a contest is when we, after the hand recount, if the result, if we don't take the lead, and we feel there are issues that could change the result of the election, that we can then file a contest. We think reconciliation is a pretty big issue that could change the outcome of the election. There are also other issues like illegal vouching and some questions about military absentees and some other issues that we would pursue as part of a contest. And so it was disappointing, quite frankly. I'll be honest with you, Scott. We felt like the law was pretty clear. But you know what they say, there's the law and there's what a judge thinks, and those two things don't always match.
Yeah, well, I'm having a hard time with this because, again, we should explain reconciliation. All you're saying is the amount of actual votes counted ought to match with the amount of ballots issued, right? That's the reconciliation you're talking about?
This is why I'm trying not to go on a rant here because I'm very frustrated with the fact that all we're asking is that Minnesota law be followed. Minnesota law has provisions to make sure that the number of ballots cast equals the number of voters. Now, believe it or not, and I know that neither one of us are cynics about this, but there are many occasions in which the number of ballots exceeds the number of voters, okay? In the last election, 2008, there were many estimates, including one from Secretary of State Mark Ritchie, which said that there were as many as 17,000. Other estimates said there were as many as 40,000 more ballots cast than voters on the voter rolls that day, on Election Day. That's a serious issue, and we felt like it was better to deal with this now, prior to the recount starting, than dealing with it after the hand recount. However, so be it. We will bring it up during the contest phase.
Tony Sutton, chairman of the Republican Party in Minnesota, is here. Any questions? Welcome. 701-271-1100. Toll free from wherever you're listening. And appreciate all the good Minnesota listeners out there. Already this hour, heard from folks down St. Cloud, down in a city I didn't even know existed, Princeburg, Minnesota, west of Montevideo, Detroit Lakes, and other places. So we know there's lots of good conservative listeners, period. Conservative, unhinged liberals, we'll take them all throughout Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota, and we appreciate you. 888-598-8464, and Fred in Moorhead has a question for Tony Sutton. Go ahead, Fred.
Hi, Tony. I've talked to you about this before. I can't stress it enough. The situation as to what's happening again. If Emmer wins with us having the legislature, we have got to get photo ID to correct this once and for all in Minnesota. If Emmer loses or if it's contested and it drags out, into the early spring or whatever, hopefully Pawlenty and the legislature can do something about it then, because otherwise it's never going to happen, and every 4 years we're going to go through this all over again.
Oh, I agree, Fred. I'm a little road weary today from this recount, and I can tell you that if we had photo ID and got rid of vouching, and heaven forbid got rid of even same-day registration, we wouldn't have any of these issues. We would know what the voter rolls were. We wouldn't have these concerns. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, what the problem is, guys, is that I don't think that we have ballot box stuffing like in Cook County, Chicago, because we don't need it. The system is designed, and under Mark Ritchie's leadership as Secretary of State, the system is so loose it has the same impact as stuffing the ballot box. You have people who aren't eligible to vote voting. You have phantom votes. There are more ballots cast than voters. You have felons voting in the 2008 election that we know people are being prosecuted right in Clay County, being prosecuted for having voted illegally. The system is so loose, it has the same effect of stuffing the ballot box in Cook County, Chicago, where you have thousands, who knows, maybe tens of thousands of people who are not eligible to vote voting. And it's not a victimless crime. It dilutes your vote, my vote, all lawful votes when we allow votes to be counted that shouldn't be counted.
And by the way, the legislature has had a chance, I don't know how many times, Tony, you probably know better than I, to address this issue. And correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but it's very clear the Democrats do not want to fix this. They quite enjoy this ambiguity because they have had how many opportunities to go along with a very simple thing that says, hey, when you vote, show me your ID. I mean, how many times have they had a chance to vote on this, Tony?
Well, there have been many times. As a matter of fact, Tom Emmer was one of the people who carried the bill on photo ID in the legislature every year since he's been there for the last 6 years, and there was photo ID that came up before that. I think with the Republicans in the legislature, we're going to get that bill passed. Really, the question is if Tom Emmer's not there to sign it, if it is Mark Dayton, how do we get Mark Dayton to sign a bill like that? One thing we could do is we could make photo ID a constitutional amendment. It doesn't require a gubernatorial signature to take this to the voters and have them vote it. And I'm convinced that 80% or more of Minnesotans say, yeah, you should show your photo ID to vote. And that might be a way to circumvent if Tom Emmer does not become governor, to still get photo ID into law.
Tony, as I say, I don't know if it's too harsh, but it seems to me pretty clear they don't want every vote counted when they're, blatantly against things like photo ID for voting. I mean, they want.
Well, they only want they want all their votes counted.
Yeah.
And they want people. And what it is they advocate for things that allow people who shouldn't be voting to vote. And this is not a game. This isn't ninth grade civics class in high school, and you're trying to pick a class president. We're trying to pick governors, senators, legislators, congressmen. And when you allow people who shouldn't be voting to vote, you really take away from the process. And I've taken a lot of criticism. Mark Dayton and these people are saying that I'm deliberately trying to say that these election officials aren't doing their jobs and casting aspersions on our election system in Minnesota. But I, in this case, they're right. We don't have a perfect system in Minnesota, and we don't have a system that even approaches perfection. I think we've got some good, hard-working election officials who are doing their jobs, but they're not getting the direction from Mark Ritchie, of course, the Acorn activist who happens to be Secretary of State. He wears a coat and tie now and looks kind of like a country club Republican, but he is in reality a radical leftist for whom the ends justify the means, and make no mistake about it. And this is what we're up against. And I tell you what, we're going to keep fighting the fight, Scott. And the chattering classes and the wine and brie crowd are going to give us a hard time for doing it. But we're going to keep doing this because it's important and to make sure that every lawful vote counts.
Frank, next question for Tony Sutton. Go ahead, Frank, you're up.
Who is Mark Ritchie?
What's that?
Where is Mark Ritchie? Who is he or where is he?
Well, he's a Democrat. He's Secretary of State in Minnesota. He's in charge of elections in Minnesota. He's Democrat, but his background.
By the way, he was also represented in the Supreme Court deliberations, voting, or rather arguing, making the case against reconciliation, against there being a connection between the amount of votes and the amount of ballots issued. So that gives you an idea where
he's a well-known left-wing activist in Minnesota. Has been active across the country. Was involved with Acorn. Was involved with the WTO protests in Seattle. One of the organizers of the protests out there that turned violent. This guy is, he wears a coat and tie now, and he looks like a local insurance salesman. But he's a radical leftist, and this is the guy that's in charge of our election in Minnesota. And I know he's elected, so I should respect the will of the people. But I just have a hard time having confidence in this process. I mean, he's in the Supreme Court arguing against following the law. I mean, the law is so plainly written that it just is. I'm kind of, I can't understand how the justices and the election officials can just cavalierly cast it aside. I mean, it really, you wonder why people don't have confidence in the legal system in this country. This is one small example.
Frank, anything else?
Yeah, wasn't he the incumbent candidate last time?
What's that?
Yes, he was the
incumbent. No, 6. Yes.
Right, yeah. Because I heard him on a local radio ad and said there were 17,000 overcounted votes, and he wanted our support again, so that won't happen again. when he was campaigning. I heard a speech from him.
Yeah, that rhetoric doesn't match reality. Frank, appreciate the call. I want to ask about vouchers and also the military votes getting counted. We need to take a break, Tony. We'll do that when we come back. Tony Sutton, chair of the Republican Party of Minnesota, with an update on the recount battle for the gubernatorial spot in Minnesota. We'll do that when we continue. More of your calls welcome. 888-598-8464. Talking Turkey next hour, plus John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, on what the U.S. ought to do in response to what North Korea is doing to South Korea. That when we roll on in the Common Sense Club. We are back on the Common Sense Club of the Scott Hennen Show, 7 before the top of the hour. We continue our conversation with Tony Sutton, chairman of the Republican Party of Minnesota. We mentioned the whole reconciliation debate. That's what was before the Minnesota Supreme Court, of matching ballots with actual votes. There's a couple other issues that are of concern here that haven't received as much attention. One is on vouchers. Explain what you're watching there and what you'd like corrected there, Tony.
Minnesota state law allows people to vouch for other people in the polling places. So if you and I live in the same precinct, Scott, and you don't happen to have your ID and you're not registered to vote, I can vouch for you and you get to vote. And it's a very arcane 19th century way of doing things, and it's open to a lot of potential for fraud and abuse. And we've had numerous incidents reported to us across the state, situations where people are being vouched for that either aren't residents, or the people that are vouching for them aren't authorized or eligible, rather, to vouch for people. And there are cases at the University of Minnesota in which numerous students were vouched for by people who weren't eligible to do vouching, et cetera. And this by all of this vouching abuse tends to happen in parts of the state that are very liberal and heavily Democrat. And we think there's the potential for fraud, quite frankly. We've been investigating these complaints, and no doubt will be a part of our contest in December.
Also, we had during the Frank and Coleman race a lot of examples where military votes were not counted. What do we know about that this time around?
Well, we're exploring that very closely. One of the things we need to get from the Secretary of State and from local electoral officials once they update the state registered voter system is an idea of how many military absentees came in from overseas. Because we want to make sure that the votes of people that serve this country are getting counted, and especially those that are overseas where it's difficult to get the ballot to them and get it back. Remember, we moved up our primary process in Minnesota, our election process, to allow more time for the processing of military absentees. And some of the anecdotal reports that we're getting back is that a lot of service people are having trouble voting. And once we get the update of the state registered voter rolls, we'll be able to know exactly if there was a problem. But there was early indications that, we've even had reports of service people who lined up their leave in such a way so that they could come home and vote because they had no confidence that their ballot was going to get back here in time if they had voted absentee, so they came and voted in person. That shouldn't have to be that way. And these are the people who are defending our right to vote, and we should at least expedite and making sure their votes are being counted.
So the recount will begin next week. It goes through early December, and literally the whole process of counting the votes. Again, a lot of conventional wisdom out there suggesting that the difference as it exists now is too much to overcome for Emmer. What do you say to that?
Well, it's not. If our argument about reconciliation, it's really not if there are too many ballots being cast. I mean, if you look at where most of these overvotes tend to come from Democrat parts of the state. So our concern really is if there are these phantom votes in places like Minneapolis and St. Paul, they're not being cast for Tom Emmer. So, we think it's important that people have confidence in the result, that we know for a fact these things have been dealt with and taken care of. So, but I think it is possible to close that gap. But we're going to work our tail off. And you tell you what, Scott, as I talked to Tom Emmer about this morning, this isn't just about his election. This is also about reforming the election process in Minnesota. We can't let the vouching, we can't let the lack of photo ID, we can't let these things go on. We've got to use this as an opportunity not just to put Tom over the top, but also to reform our election system in Minnesota.
Keep fighting, Tony. Appreciate the update. Tony Sutton, chair of the Republican Party of Minnesota, on the Emmer-Dayton gubernatorial race. We'll watch it here on the Common Sense Club. News and weather coming up. Don't go away.